Welcome back to Murderous Minds Monday, where we cover the most sadistic and twisted serial killers and murderers of the modern age. Today we are going to be covering the case of Natasha Cornett. This is very different to previous ones that I've covered, but you will hear more about that later on in the video. She is nicknamed the daughter of Satan. So if you want to hear more about the daughter of Satan, Natasha Cornett, her early life and the events that led to her subsequent jail time, then just keep on watching. Natasha Wallen Cornett was born on the 26th of January 1979 in Kentucky. She lived with her mother in the rural area of Kentucky, and her mother's name was Madonna Wallen. Her father was Roger Burgess, but she didn't really have anything to do with him, as her mother was actually having an affair with Roger when Natasha was born. To go into the story of Natasha, we need to actually go into the childhood of her mother, Madonna. So her mother, Madonna, was molested at the age of 4 or 5 by a local pastor in her church, and her family didn't really talk about it. She was only taken to the doctor, but just to deal with the physical effects, nothing to do with like the emotional effects of what had happened. At the age of just 17, her mother Madonna married a Pepsi Cola salesman who was an abusive alcoholic called Don Adkins. The couple did go on to have a child together in 1960. It was a daughter called Valina, but the couple later divorced in 1966 after Madonna actually fired a shotgun at Atkins while he threatened to kill her. He was not fatally wounded, and she was not charged, as they saw it as self-defense. Madonna actually went on to marry again. Her second husband was called Ed Wallen, who actually went on to molest her first daughter, Valina. Ed Wallen was the man that she was married to when she had the affair with Ed Burgess, who is Natasha's father. So Madonna has had quite a turbulent childhood and adult, or beginning to her adult life already, and then she falls pregnant with Natasha. So Natasha grew up with a lack of a father figure. She didn't have a man in her life, and her mother was very irresponsible. She actually would leave school before reaching 9th grade, and it's said that she didn't have any employment. The only thing she kind of did to get money was babysitting, but that was it. There was no other employment that she got. When she was in school, by junior high, Natasha was alienated by all of her peers at school, and she was seen as an outsider. This is thought to have been because of her gothic dress sense and her sort of alternative style, and she also had very odd behaviours around people. And so by high school, she was being openly harassed by her peers and bullied by the other students at school. She suffered with anorexia at this time, and she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but due to a lack of medical insurance, she was never treated for her bipolar disorder. Her pleas for help were ignored by unsympathetic school authorities, and so she dropped out of school freshman year of high school. After she left high school, she began to abuse drugs and alcohol, and she would use illegal drugs such as heroin and ecstasy and cocaine. And at just 14 years old, she was arrested for the first time for forgery. She actually stole a checkbook, and she was sentenced in juvenile court to a year of probation. But not long after this, she was actually arrested again, as she has assaulted her mother with a knife and threatened to kill her, but her mother dropped the charges, and the case was dismissed from court. So no further action was taken in regards to her attacking her mother. On her 17th birthday, she actually went on to marry her friend Stephen Cornett. The marriage did not last very long, and Stephen ended the marriage just 6 months after, which obviously left Natasha devastated. Her mental health just further deteriorated after this time. Now we get on to the murders and the lead up to the murders of today's case. So moving on from here, this is a very different case to previous cases that we have discussed. I'll discuss at the end why, but just pay attention to the story and then let me know in the comments what you think. On the 6th of April 1997, at the age of 18, Natasha left for New Orleans in her friend Joseph's Chevrolet with her friends Edward Dean Mullins, who was 19 years old, Joseph Reisner, who was 20, Crystal Sturgill, who was 18, Jason Blake Bryant, who was 14, and Karen Howe, who was 17. So this is a wide variety of friends. The night before they had all left, Natasha had booked a hotel room for them to party in, and this was at the Collie Motel. So the group had their big party, they got very drunk, as you do, but the party ended up getting very out of hand and a lot of damage was done to the property, which would have resulted in the group being arrested. So to avoid being arrested, the group decided to head to New Orleans to avoid any legal consequences for the damaged property. The group hoped that they could start a new life in New Orleans. Natasha had actually spent a few weeks in New Orleans after her divorce from Stephen. The group discussed the possibility of carjacking to get a bigger car because the car that they were in was not big enough for them all to travel in. It was a very small car. So not long after this discussion, they met the Lilyfeld family at the Interstate Highway Rest Area in Greenville in Tennessee. So the family consisted of Vidar Lilyfeld, who was 34, his wife Delphina, who was 28, and their 2 children, their daughter Tabitha, who was 6, and their son Peter, who was 2. So Vidar had actually grown up in Bergen in Norway and had moved to the US in 1985, where he met his wife Delphina. They then married in 1989 and began their family together. So Natasha and her friends decided that they would steal the family's van that they were travelling in. And so the group decided that they would arm themselves with 2 guns in order to achieve this carjacking. The 2 guns that they armed themselves with, one was a 9mm and the other was a 25 caliber pistol. So eyewitness statements stated that the group began a conversation with the family. Vidar was carrying his 2-year-old son Peter when he was approached by Natasha and Howe to discuss his religious views with them before Reisner and Bryant came up behind them and joined the group. Not long after this, Reisner pulled out the gun and said to Vidar, "I hate to do you this way, but we are going to have to take you with us for your van." So instead of just taking the van, they decided to take the whole family. He then forced the family into the back of the van, and Vidar pled with the group, throwing his keys at them, being like, take everything, throwing his wallet at them to try and get them to leave his family. But Reisner refused to accept this. At gunpoint, the family were forced into the back of the van, and Reisner ordered Vidar to drive the van while he sat in the passenger seat aiming the gun at him. So Reisner, Brian, Howe and Natasha were all in the van with the family, and the other 2 of the group were driving behind in Joseph's car. The children were obviously very upset with the situation that was going on, and to try and calm them down, Delphina began to sing to them, but Reisner didn't like this and demanded that she stopped singing. So obviously there's a lot of commotion going on in the back of the van at this point. Reisner directed Vidar to a secluded road next to an interstate near Greenville. They then forced the family out of the van at gunpoint still, and he lined them up along a ditch along the side of the road. So when the family were all lined up along the ditch, the 14-year-old in the group, Jason Bryant, shot the whole family execution style. It's not clear whether he was the only person to shoot the family, but that is what has been said. After the family was shot, Bryant checked the bodies and realised they were still alive, so he fired the last lethal shot in all of them. It was revealed that Vidar was actually shot a total of 6 times. So he received 1 shot in the side of his head and 6 into his chest. The first shot had entered his right eye and exited out of his right ear. He was then shot 3 times to the upper right hand side of his chest after he fell to the ground with the shot to his eye and ear. It was also found that the gunshots to his chest formed the shape of an equilateral triangle, so they had sort of this triangular shape to them. It was found that Delfina was shot a total of 8 times. The first shot shattered the bone in her left arm, and the second shot shattered the bone in her left thigh bone, so her femur. So these shots would have made it that Delfina couldn't stand, so she would have fallen to the ground. She was then shot an additional 6 times to her back. The first 3 shots were struck the left side of her abdomen. These shots also formed a pattern similar to Vidar's in the shape of an equilateral triangle, which is so sadistic. It's bad enough shooting someone, but to shoot someone and then like form a pretty pattern out of it is just insane. The shots pierced her stomach, leaving a 4 to 5 inch tear, and travelled through her pancreas, spleen, left kidney and her left adrenal gland. The final bullet went into her abdomen and entered her spine. Her wounds were not immediately fatal and she would have been conscious for about half an hour after. However, the group, as they drove away, drove over her body and she was conscious for this attack. Just so sadistic and disgusting. Like, this family did nothing to them. All they wanted was their van. I don't understand why they had to murder them to get it. They could have just done like a van, like a hijack, and just taken the van. Not that I would condone that either, but better than killing someone. So the 6-year-old daughter Tabitha, I am going to be talking about her injuries, but in not so much detail. But she was shot once in the head and this caused immediate brain death. So she died instantly, which is horrible, but I'm glad she didn't suffer because that would have been even worse. So the 2-year-old Peter, when he was found, he was transported to the pediatric ICU at the University of Tennessee Hospital. He received intensive care treatment and lots of resuscitation efforts were made to save his life. 11 days after, he had his damaged eye removed as he was shot in the eye, and he remained in hospital for a further 17 days after. But he made a full recovery. I say full, he made a recovery and was raised in Sweden by his aunt. So he was the only one to survive this attack. However, he was left blind in one eye, obviously, and he was permanently disabled and still struggles to walk. So he suffered long-term damage from this attack. After the shooting, the group abandoned their original vehicle, so John's Chevrolet, whatever it was, Cadillac. Was it a Cadillac? I can't remember. Whatever car it was, they abandoned that vehicle. Soon after they drove off, the police found Vidar and Delfina dead at the scene. And unfortunately, Tabitha died shortly after being transported to the local hospital. Like I said, Peter was the only one to survive this attack. The group carried on their journey towards New Orleans, which was the original plan, in the Lilyfeld van that they had stolen. And for some reason, they were hungry after this attack, which I find insane. And so they stopped at a Waffle House on their way to New Orleans. They had to leave the Waffle House quite quickly because a group of police suddenly entered, going for their lunch, I suppose. They decided to then abandon their plans to go to New Orleans, and they decided to drive to Mexico instead. When the group reached the Mexican border, they were actually stopped by police because they didn't have the correct documents to enter Mexico. However, they did eventually make their way into the country. They were then stopped again a little further into Mexico by the Mexican police, and the group claimed that they were lost, and that's how they'd ended up in Mexico. And also they said that that explained why they didn't have the correct documents on them. The police ordered the group out of the van to conduct a full search of the van, and they found a knife in the van as well as a family album of the Lilyfeld family. Just 2 days after the shooting, which is incredible, the 6 perpetrators were taken into custody by the US Customs and immigration officials in Arizona. When they were arrested, several of the perpetrators actually had personal belongings of the Lilyfeld families in their possession, which just strengthens the evidence against them. The group, so Natasha and the rest of the group, were transferred back to Greenville, Tennessee, where they were booked into the county jail on the charge of first-degree murder, attempted murder, and kidnapping. Natasha was provided a pro bono lawyer by the courts called Eric Conn, who didn't specialise in criminal defence at all. Cons insisted that Natasha called herself the daughter of Satan, and to make claims that she worshipped the devil to lay the foundation for insanity plea. He came up with this because of her gothic look that she had, and he thought this would help her to obtain the insanity plea. The judge obviously saw straight through this and didn't think this was right, and ordered for Conn to be removed from the case. Before the case could be presented to the jury, the district attorney, Berkeley Bell, decided to offer a plea deal to the defendants. This would mean that they would receive life without parole instead of the death penalty, and it would take the death penalty off the table for this case. On the 13th of March 1998, all defendants pled guilty to the charges. Although Natasha took the plea bargain, the court actually established that she didn't actually do the shootings of the 4 victims, so she wasn't involved in that side. And during the testimony, Natasha claimed that she tried but did not succeed to stop the murders from happening. She received 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole, and 2 additional sentences of 25 years for the attempted murder and kidnapping. So since she went to prison, she's actually earned her GED and has a certificate in cosmetology, which is incredible. Her mother, Madonna, also said that she's actually a role model for a lot of people in the prison, and she serves as a mentor for some of them. However, on the 24th of August 2001, Natasha and another death row inmate, Krista Pike, attacked another fellow inmate, Patricia Jones, almost strangling Jones to death with a shoelace. However, there's not full evidence to support that this happened or how involved Natasha was with this attack. However, Christina was actually charged with the attempted murder of the inmate. As of now, Natasha is still in prison serving her time. Her crimes are actually revisited quite often in discussions and punishment, and she continues to evoke strong opinions from supporters of her that she shouldn't be in prison. And her story has also encouraged many to look into mental health issues and ensure there's sufficient help for those struggling. So that is the end of today's case about Natasha Cornett. Like I said, it's very different from previous cases because she's not a serial killer. She's what they would class as a mass killer, but also, do we think she's a murderer? Would you say that she was involved enough to be classed as a murderer. There's no evidence that she was involved in the shooting. The only person that was ever shown to be involved was the 14-year-old. So do you think her sentence is fair? Do you think she deserves to be in prison? I think she deserves to spend time in prison because she was involved in the kidnapping. She was involved in the murders in some aspect. She has said that she did try to stop it, but there's no evidence of that. And obviously the people are dead, so there's no evidence that she succeeded with it. So let me know down below what you think. I think she deserves some time in prison, but I don't think she deserved the full term that she was given based on the fact of how much involvement she had in the case. But let me know what you think down below. Let me know any other cases that you want to hear and see me cover. I look forward to doing more in the future. I'll be back next Monday with my next Murderous Minds Monday, where we cover another mass killer, serial killer, something of that aspect. So if you don't want to miss that, then subscribe down below. But I hope you all have an amazing day, evening, whatever time it's you're watching this, and I'll see you next week. Bye.